Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater. Today we're going to take a look at how to incorporate outboard gear into your Pro Tools sessions. Let's get started. It's very easy to set up Pro Tools so that you can incorporate external hardware into your sessions, and there are great reasons to do this. You get the functionality of devices that may not be duplicated with plugins. You also can get that analog tonality or new sounds from digital processors that you can bring into your sessions. And maybe as much as anything, it's just fun to use external hardware and incorporate that into your workflow. It's very easy to set this up. We have just a few key ingredients that we need to have. First, of course, we need to have Pro Tools. And then we need an audio interface. But with the audio interface, we need to have enough hardware sends and returns or outputs and inputs that we can connect our gear and then route to it from Pro Tools. So for example, today I've got this Focusrite Red 8-line audio interface that has 8 line outputs and 8 line inputs. The 8 line outputs are being routed to the 8 inputs on this 500 series rack, but it could just as well be a rack processor. It could be a Euro rack processor. We could even be using a reamp box and connecting a guitar pedal if we wanted to. So whatever it is, we're bringing our outputs from the audio interface to the inputs of the hardware. Then the outputs from the hardware are coming back to the inputs on the audio interface. Now beyond this, we just need to tell Pro Tools what's happening inside the I/O setup. So let's take a look at that. If we go to Setup and I/O, we'll start with inputs. So here we can see all the inputs for our audio interface. And in our case, we can rename these as well by double clicking. In our case, I've got the Dione, which is this Wes Audio stereo bus compressor, on inputs 7 and 8. On input 6, actually I'm going to rotate this open. On input 6, I've got the SSL EQ. On input 5, we have the right channel of the RMX reverb. So we'll call that RMX right. That's this processor right here. Now this is actually a 3-space unit inside of our 500 series rack, so we're skipping number 4, and we'll jump over to number 3, and we'll name that RMX left. Okay, so that'll get us started for this demonstration today. Now let's do the same I/O setup for our outputs. One thing we'll have to do here is that our outputs default to being stereo in this case. On your interface, they may be mono, but in this case, they're defaulting to stereo. So we need to add new subpaths here. So we'll add 2 mono subpaths under here. Number 3 will be our RMX left output. We're actually not using number 4. Let's add 2 new subpaths here as well. The first will be RMX right, and the second will be our SSL EQ, and then 7 and 8 is our Wes Audio Dione. One last thing we want to take a look at in this dialog is our inserts, and the inserts are what allow us to drop the routing for this hardware processing into our channels in Pro Tools. So let's go over to Insert here. 3 and 4, we'll open that up, and again, let's name these. I just like to name everything so that it stays organized and easy to manage. Now at this point, we can start to route signals to and from our hardware just using inserts. There's one thing with Pro Tools that we need to be aware of, and that's that the inputs and the outputs must match. So if we're sending on output 3, we have to be coming back on 3. We don't have the option of routing to different inputs and outputs inside Pro Tools. So for example, I've got a drum kit set up here with addictive drums where I've got the main drum output here on this stereo track, and then I'm bringing the kick and the snare in separately on mono auxes. So if I want to add the SSL EQ onto just my kick drum, I can go up to my inserts, and we want to go down to I/O in this case because we're actually dealing with hardware I/O. We'll scroll up, select our SSL EQ that comes up here, and now when we play, so our signal is being routed to this aux channel. Then the insert sends it to output number 6 on our audio interface. Output number 6 is connected to the input on our SSL EQ. We're coming out of the SSL EQ back to input number 6 on the audio interface, which is the other side of our insert here, and then it continues on through our aux channel. It's very slick, very easy to do. Now we can do the same thing with stereo inserts. So for example, if I want to put this Wes Audio bus compressor onto my 2 bus, I simply come up here. Again, we go down to I/O, and we can choose Dione. Now our mix will be coming through the 2 bus. The send will be going out of the insert and out of outputs 7 and 8 on the audio interface, into the inputs on the compressor, back out of the outputs of the compressor, and into the inputs of the audio interface, inputs 7 and 8, and then back into Pro Tools and continuing out to our monitors. So again, very slick, very easy to do. There's one thing we do need to be aware of with inserts with Pro Tools, and that's that there can be some latency. The time it takes to come out of Pro Tools, go through the interface, come back into the interface, and come back into Pro Tools can take a millisecond or 2 to make that happen. And so in some cases, we'll need to compensate for that. If you're blending tracks together, you may get phase cancellation if you don't. The way you do that is, again, under Setup and I/O, and here under Hardware Insert Delay. So you can manually type in, I happen to know this is about a 1 millisecond delay for each of these inserts. So you can manually type that in for each of your inserts where you need to if you're having phase issues. If in this case, with the kick drum and with our bus compressor, and when we look at the reverb as well, really not an issue, so we don't have to worry about it. But if you are blending together 2 of the same signal, one processed, one not, you may get phase issues, or if you have multiple drum mics, those kinds of things. And you can compensate for that with that hardware insert delay. The easiest way to figure out the insert delay is to record a track, say a metronome where you have a sharp pulse, and then send that same metronome out through your audio interface and back in and record that to a second track, and then compare the 2 in time. The difference is what you type into the hardware insert delay. There's one more thing I want to show you here as far as routing signals to bring in external hardware, and that's using sends and returns. With a time-based effect, like a delay or this AMS reverb that we've got here, typically you don't put those into an insert on a single channel. Typically you put them on a send and a return so you can route multiple channels on a bus through them. Doing that is very easy. So we'll set up 2 mono returns. I'm going to put those on aux inputs. We'll create those. This is going to be my verb left. This will be my verb right. And I'm going to set this input to the RMS left, and this input to the RMX right. Now we'll also need to send from 1 or more of our tracks into the reverb. So let's send from this snare drum track here. We'll choose RMX left. We just send one side. We'll bump that up so that we're sending a level out. And now let's pan these left and right and hit play. So lots of fun reverb sounds available in this RMX 16. So what's happening is our snare drum is coming into this aux. It's being sent out of this send, which is on output number 3 of our audio interface, coming into the input of the reverb. The stereo output from the reverb is coming back into these 2 channels, and that's how we're able to monitor that. Now we could group these 2 channels together. Just hit Command G. We can call that verb, and now we can adjust the levels, same time, solo and mute them at the same time. One thing you want to be aware of is when you bounce your mixes out, that your audio hardware is actually being included in those bounces. A lot of times when I'm doing a mix like this using external hardware, I'll actually do the bounce out in real time, and that way I'm sure that what's being processed here is being brought back into my mix. Another option would be to record the output from this gear onto new tracks and just include those into your mix rather than routing through when you're bouncing. I hope you've enjoyed this look at how to incorporate Outboard Gear into your Pro Tools sessions. It's a very easy process that lets you take advantage of all the sounds, all the functionality, and the workflow of having external hardware along with what's happening virtually inside the computer. Thanks for joining me today. I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Click here for more videos like this, or start at sweetwater.com for all your music instrument and pro audio needs.